Wow, that's all I can say. This BenQ monitor is the best monitor I have used, so let's see why. The BenQ EX2780Q is a $460 27-inch IPS monitor with a 144Hz refresh rate, but that isn't what makes it special. Its near bezel-less display surrounds a QHD 2560 by 1440 panel with a 5 millisecond grey-to-grey response time and FreeSync for tearless gameplay. It is HDR400 certified with 8-bit color plus FRC. Now that stands for frame rate control. That does help increase the amount of color shades. Now BenQ states that it supports DCI P3 color space, and using my Spider 5 Pro I measured 100% of sRGB, 87% of Adobe RGB, which makes it fine for those that game and do some content creation work on the side. Now for those seeking better than that, you'll probably need to go for a 4K panel. Now at the back you have a 5-watt subwoofer, and at the front you have two 2-watt speakers that combine to produce brilliant audio. I have not heard much better on a monitor. In fact, it's very similar to my TV and will fit a medium-sized room. Should you wish to use headphones, there is a 3.5mm headphone jack underneath. And next to this there are two HDMI 2.0 ports, a DisplayPort 1.4 and a USB-C port which has DisplayPort Alt mode. Now this can be used for both video and audio input, as well as power things such as your cell phone, and I read that it can also power us up to about 60 watts on a low powered laptop. Now I didn't have one on hand to test, unfortunately. Now as usual, these ports are awkwardly placed to get to, so BenQ is not alone here in this regard, but it is frustrating nonetheless. At the back of the metal stand is a system to keep your wires neat and tidy, but it can get rather cramped when you put 3 cables in there, and what I did find was that the cover can pop off. The provided HDMI and DisplayPort cable are quite long at 2 meters and they were perfectly fine, but I did find that the USB-C cable, which is about half its length, was a little bit on the short side. I do like that the monitor doesn't need an external power brick, which does save on clutter. It is VESA mount compatible, and should you wish to mount it to an arm, that should be possible as well. Now the stand itself, although pretty sturdy, it doesn't offer much in the way of adjustability. You can just tilt it back and forth. But I do like that its base is a metal ring in which you can actually store stuff like your mobile phone and the included remote control. Now as with other monitors, you can change settings using controls at the back of the unit, and it does have a handy joystick. But having this remote is so convenient. In addition to all of the regular settings, you can change volume and turn in the monitor off and on. Very handy. There's also a handy wheel on the left hand side of the monitor to alter the volume. And at the front there is an IR panel which also houses a sensor that adjusts the brightness of the display according to ambient light conditions. Now it's not too sensitive either, so it doesn't change randomly on you, but if you're sitting in a darkened room, it does help. You have the usual input settings, picture options like sharpness, display mode and smart focus, which emphasizes a certain portion of the screen. Under color, you can choose HDRI mode, regular HDR, Cinema HDRI or Game HDRI. Now this is where the monitor stands out over other HDR monitors, I think. The I in HDRI stands for intelligence, and its objective is to enhance contrast, color and shadow areas without overexposing bright areas. Now this has always been a problem with other HDR 400 panels I have used in the past. It just makes everything brighter. And on the top is HDR off, and on the bottom Game HDRI. Without the HDR, the image just looks washed out. There aren't really any shadow areas. But however, with the Game HDRI activated, there's more definition on the rocks and it looks more realistic. You may have noticed that Windows has an HDR setting. Now the big problem with this, in my opinion, is that it makes reading text much harder. The text just looks blurry. But if you turn this off, what happens to HDR then? Well, the BenQ monitor has emulated HDR, and to be honest, I saw no difference in Shadow of the Tomb Raider using emulated Game HDR at all. However, switched to a brighter scene like we have here in Far Cry 5, I did notice that the Windows HDR activated, it made the whole image brighter and the colours look more muted. Now look at the flowers and see how, how the yellow has been affected. So my recommendation would be to keep this setting off and stick with emulated HDR. Watching movies is delightful on this panel, and if you do have HDR content to watch, it really makes it pop out. The extra pixels of 109 pixels per inch made for a nice sharp image, and I find the 27-inch screen size perfect for gaming. Now, since you can activate G-Sync via FreeSync, gameplay was super smooth, and I definitely seem to do much better than I did on my 15-inch laptop screen. It doesn't have any gaming features like, on-screen reticule, but, I never use those things anyway. The display is definitely brighter using the standard HDR or the HDR off at 359 nits with a contrast of about 860 to 1. Viewing angles are also good, which one would expect for an IPS panel. Here I show it alongside my Dell 27-inch 144Hz TN monitor. I thought the Dell was good, but compared to the BenQ, it is washed out. The colours aren't as vibrant, and I know which one I will be keeping. Ghosting performance compared to the Dell, which I believe is a 1 millisecond response time, was just as good, and I also noticed no backlight bleed whatsoever. The BenQ EX2070-80Q does what it says on the tin, and it does it well. Now at $460, it is not cheap for sure, and my Dell monitor only cost me $150, but that is only 1080p, and its speakers, to be honest, do suck, and its colours aren't all that great. Now I think if you just want a monitor for gaming, something fast like a TN panel does make sense, but if you want to watch movies, edit photos, do some video work, I think this BenQ EX2070-80Q is a fine choice. And I will leave a link in the description below for an Amazon affiliate link there. Now I would like to thank you for watching. Remember, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.